Hi, I'd like to welcome you all this afternoon to our Zoom gathering to remember Stan Lofchie, who died on December 2nd. And we have a gathering of a large number of people here this afternoon and to share and talk about our relationship and love for Stan. So I'm going to turn you over to Mary Beth, who will be our host for this afternoon's gathering.
Once the Kaddish is recited, then Martin will show us a video that he created remembering Stan. After the video, I'm going to ask any of you who wishes to share in remembrances of Stan. And so here's the order that we'll do that in. First, we'll have Matthew, Stan's son, and any other of Stan's family members that want to speak. Then we'll go to the Netherlands, and Lukie's family will have a chance to share, any of them who want to. There's no pressure if you don't want to. Then after the family has spoken, we'll ask Gary Lawless to share his reflections and poetry that he prepared for us. After Gary, we will open it up for any other friends and fellow activists who want to share reflections about Stan. So Caroline Clavel is managing the Zoom for us. She will keep a queue of people who want to speak. Okay, so that's the plan for the day. Joanne, I'm hoping that Josh is here and he could be the one to recite the Kaddish. Josh, are you here?
I'm here and I'm
Can you
ready.
unmute?
Pull it so we have the English up, Martin. So that's the English translation of what I'm about to read in Hebrew. As you can see, it doesn't mention death or dying or the afterlife or anything else, but it is the tradition. Yitgadal, Yitkadash, Shmei Rabbah, Be'alma Divrei Chirutei, V'amlich Malchutei, V'yachon Uv Yom Echalon, V'chaye Dechol Beit Yisrael, V'agalah Uvizman Kariv V'imru Amen. Yehei Shmei Rabbah Mevarach Li'alam Ulmai Almaya. Yitbarach V'yishtabach V'yitpa'ar V'yitroman V'yitnaseh V'yithadar V'yithaleh V'yithalal Shemei Kudashah B'rechu Le'elah Min Kol Berchata V'rishata Tub Shechata V'namechmata Da'am Ran Ba'ama V'yamru Amen. Yesh Shema Ba Min Shemaya V'chayam Aleinu V'kol Yisrael V'imru Amen. Osef Shalom B'morav V'yaseh Shalom Aleinu V'al Kol Yisrael V'imru Amen.
Amen. Thank you both very much. So we'll look at Martin's video and then we'll ask Matthew to speak.
Solidarity forever, for the union makes us strong.
Solidarity forever, solidarity forever, solidarity forever, for the union makes us strong.
times, under these circumstances, it's really painfully difficult to express what ought to be expressed. So I sometimes depend on literature or art or music to try and cover my inabilities. There was a film that I saw, took place on the docks of Marseille, and this semi-employed longshoreman went into his favorite cafe bar, and he ordered his usual lunch, one crust of bread, small, and one glass of wine, large. And people started to rag on him, saying that he didn't do his share of what had to be done in the family, and his wife was too good for him. After a while, he responded, "I've heard a lot of sentiment like that over the years, and it used to bother me a great deal until I got to know her better. And then I realized she was too good for any man." So it might just as well be me. First, I want to tell you, when this happened, I was, and probably still am, pretty nearly totally overwhelmed. And under those circumstances, where, you know, you're regressed almost to an infantile state, it's important, if you're lucky, to have someone who can be what they call an adult. And that turned out to be Mary Beth Sullivan. So, what can I tell you? I mean, she's, over the last, I would say, year, we were relying on that kind of adult involvement to keep things from just going all wrong. It's not an easy job. I wanted you to know that. Lofchie and I, as you may have gathered, were really close. And when it came time that, in my opinion, we needed help to get through the daily tasks, I said to Luke, this is a story I think we need, and she said, we're doing all right. I think we can go on doing all right. Well, the thing is, when she said that, I heard her mother's voice. On our first trip to another 1966, Matthew was with us, and the family had just moved from a great big house in Amsterdam, raised their 8 kids, to this really small apartment in Bloemendaal. And so I said to her, how are you making it from 2 such very different circumstances? And she said, I think we did well there, and we're going to try to do well here. And Luke said, we're doing all right. It was like I heard it a second time.
Tú me quieres dejar, yo no quiero sufrir. Contigo me voy, mi santa, aunque me cueste morir. Tú me quieres dejar, yo no quiero sufrir. Contigo me voy, mi santa, aunque me cueste morir. Tú me quieres dejar, yo no quiero sufrir. Contigo me voy, mi santa, aunque me cueste morir. Y aunque me cueste morir, y aunque me cueste la vida, claro que me voy contigo, porque tú eres mi querida. Tú me quieres dejar, yo no quiero sufrir. Contigo me voy, mi santa, aunque me cueste morir. Que tú me echaste el abandono el día que tú te fuiste, que tú no sabes lo bueno que eres amor, el amor que tú perdiste. Tú me quieres dejar, yo no quiero sufrir. Contigo me voy, mi santa, aunque me cueste morir. Hace un rato tú eras mía, pero ya se pasaron aquellos tiempos. La buena cosa de la vida siempre se la lleva el viento. Tú me quieres dejar.
When the union's inspiration through the workers' blood shall run, there can be no power greater anywhere beneath the sun. Yet what force on earth is weaker than the feeble strength of one? But the union makes us strong. It is we who plowed the prairies, built the cities where they trade, dug the mines and built the workshops, endless miles of railroad laid. Now we stand outcast and starving mid the wonders we have made, but the union makes us strong. In our hands is placed a power greater than their hoarded gold, greater than the might of atoms, magnified 1,000-fold. We can bring to birth a new world from the ashes of the old, for the union makes us strong. They have taken untold millions that they never toiled to earn, but without our brain and muscle not a single wheel can turn. We can break their haughty power, gain our freedom when we learn that the union makes us strong.
Solidarity forever, for the union makes us strong. Place the power greater than their hoarded gold, greater than the might of atoms magnified 1,000-fold. We can bring to the earth a new world from the ashes of the old, for the union makes us strong. Solidarity forever, for the union makes us strong.
Solidarity forever, for the union makes us strong.
Okay.
Well, that is such an amazing scene to see everybody applauding and hearing no sound whatsoever. Thank you all so much. Thank you so much to Martin for putting those incredible pictures and visuals together. So the good news is that while that was playing, we heard from Bannister Center, and so they are putting it together to get Kiwi to join us. So Kiwi, can you hear us?
Yes.
Great. So
Yeah.
Kiwi, thank you so much for making this happen. Take a deep breath. I'm going to give you a minute, and I'm going to ask Matthew to be the first person to speak. You just missed a 10-minute video that showed some pictures of your dad and some clips of him speaking in the way only he speaks. And now it's time in our schedule to hear from Matthew, and then you, and then anyone else from Stan's family that's here who wants to speak. So hang on a second and we'll ask Matthew to speak, okay?
All right.
Thank you. Matthew.
Yes. In 1948, I gave a story to Mary Beth about my dad organizing a rally for Henry Wallace. But before that, he was going door to door, taking signatures, getting signatures to put Henry Wallace on the ballot in Massachusetts. And he would go around and people, they didn't know about Henry Wallace, or they thought he was a pinko or whatever, and they wouldn't sign. And my dad would say to them, I get 10 cents a signature. And then they would sign. In 1952 or so, he was at Clark University in Massachusetts, and a professor had an idea of sending his students out into the streets of Worcester with ink blots. And they were supposed to show these ink blots to people in their houses and then diagnose the person, diagnose what the person was like, or making an analysis. And one ink blot kept coming back with the description that it looked like an atom bomb. And the students, some of them would diagnose that person as being, you know, unstable or violent or things like that. But my father diagnosed the ink blot and said that the problem was it did in fact look like an atom bomb. That's why people were saying that. In 1954 or so, his first job after school was with Children's Hospital in Boston. He had a patient, a girl in her teens, and she said to him that she was contemplating suicide. And my father first said, well, I don't think that's a good idea. And then she said, why not? So my father was stumped. So he said, because I don't want you to. And that statement got out as that he had said that to her, and he was heavily criticized for it, that it was, you know, not proper decorum, that it could be taken as some kind of advance to her. But my father just said, you know, she asked me a question, and that's what all I could come up with. One of the things that my father was very interested in, very knowledgeable of outside of work, was the game of baseball. As far as I could tell, from the 1930 to the present, he knew everything about baseball. He knew all the players. One time I can remember holding a book which described players who were very good players, but not good enough to be in the Hall of Fame. And I just leafed through it, and he knew. I would ask, well, what do you know about so-and-so? And he would practically recite the information that was in the book for every single player. So that was remarkable memory. All I can say otherwise, that I miss my dad, and I mean, that doesn't even thought of his being gone as real until I saw Martin's video. Things I read or see, the first thing I think of is that, oh, I got to tell Dad about that. But everyone else has their memories too. That's all.
Matthew, thank you so much for that really powerful share. You managed to get it all in just at 3 minutes too. You are remarkable. Maureen, did you have something you wanted to offer before you have to leave?
Thank you very much. I still have a little more than 15 minutes, but thank you, Kathy. No, I just want to say that my uncle Stan and Aunt Lukie were, very amazing people. I think to most of us in Holland, they visited every 2 years. And I've also had the opportunity to visit them in the States for 3 times. So I got a bit of a taste also of the farmers market and all that. That was nice. And at this moment, I just want to thank you guys, the 3 hosts, so much for organizing this. And it's my Zoom debut in this manner. In spite of everything, it's still my debut, in spite of the world today. So anyway, yeah, it's wonderful that you're setting this up for all of us. And I just want to say goodbye, because at some moment I'm just gone, because I need to be in. I need to get going from where I am and be in before curfew time. I need to be home. So thank you for letting me in. And I suppose it's Kevin's turn, or whatever you guys say, and I'll unmute myself now. Okay.
Thank you, Maureen. Thank you.
Thank you.
So, okay, Kiwi, now it's your turn, and you will share it. Can you unmute again? Do you remember how? Thank you.
You're welcome. I don't have the opportunity to ask. Maureen said that my father is her uncle. Did she say that?
Yes.
So who is Maureen's father?
This is Lukey's niece.
Oh, Lukey's niece.
Yes.
Oh, well, Mary Beth,
Yes.
close enough. Oh, she is beautiful.
It's true.
Yes. Okay. Okay. Yes. By Matthew's request, he said he asked me if I knew how to recite the Mourner's Kaddish, and I said yes, Matthew, I can do that. Yiskadal Yiskadash.
TV, we did it already.
The Alma Divra Chirosevia Michmal Hussein. Chayechon Oviomechon. Chayelchon Beisrael. Bagala Uzman Kori Limaru Omen. Yehei Shmei Rabo Min Shamaya. Yiskadal Yiskadash. Yisador. Yisalei Yisalar. Shmeid Hutsa Brichu. Leila Min Chotsa Vishirata. Tush Bechasa V'nechemasa. Damiran Yalma Bimaru. Amen. Otse Shalom Bimroma. Uyas Shalom. Adleinu Ve'al Kol Yisrael Bimaru. Amen. I hope I did it justice.
That was brilliant, Kiwi. Thank you so much. We heard Josh recite it earlier, and I think it's a huge gift to us to have this prayer recited again by you. So we'll come back to you later to share a reflection of your father. At this point, I wondered if any of your, what would they be, your uncles have something to share, or your cousins, I guess. Are there any of your cousins here that might have something to share now? There's no pressure, but if you want to, you could raise your virtual hand.
My eldest cousin Mark had Dad had a very soft spot for Mark.
I see Mark's hand is raised now, Kiwi. So so we're going to let Mark speak now, okay? He has his hand raised.
Oh, good.
Thank you.
Hi, Kevin. Hi, Matthew. Can you hear me? Okay.
We sure can, Mark. Thank you.
Oh, great. Well, I just want to share some, just memories over the years of Stan. We remember visiting him in New Haven, in Togus, Maine, and Brunswick, and sharing the Common Ground Country Fair with Stan Lukey maybe 2 or 3 times. Discussions about sports, especially baseball, with him. But the thing I remember most about Stan is his unwavering political passion. And it just was a conviction, such a conviction throughout his entire life. And the video certainly reflected a lot of that. And what was particularly moving and sad about the video was seeing him, with Lukey. That was pretty emotional, but I can understand the necessity of having that included. So I just remember we didn't get to see Stan and Lukey that often in the later years. It's just busyness and living far away. But those are the things I remember, and family gatherings every now and then too about Stan. So that's what I remember.
Thank you, Mark. It's a pleasure to meet you, and thank you for
too.
sharing with
Yes,
us
I've
now.
spoken with you several times, but I never met you before.
Yes, thank you.
It's my wife, Andrea. And
Hello,
Joanne is
Andrea.
watching somewhere in the house too. My daughter.
Welcome. Oh, your daughter. Yes, your mother, B, spoke
Yeah.
very frequently about your daughter and what a joy.
Well,
she
my
is.
mother today turns 99 and was not able to be here. We're going to be over her house later, but her computer is so ancient it would not have been compatible with Zoom, and we just couldn't bring her here. Would have been too difficult. So,
Thank you for sharing.
thank you.
I don't know. Is there anyone else from your family who is here that wants to share? Larry Trachtenberg is here. Can you unmute, Larry?
I'm unmuted. Unfortunately,
Perfect.
I have to do Zooms all the time, so I skilled in unmuting.
You're too skilled.
Well, I mean, I always loved to see my Uncle Stanley. I had a father, Stanley, and we would sit around the table and they agreed on nothing. They were kind of the antithesis of each other. And of course, I always agreed with my uncle. I don't know how that played, but and I think I tried to probably not as active as him, but a little bit active. But I tried to emulate many of the things he felt and said, and always enjoyed, talking politics, baseball, and having a beer. He was an excellent guy. Kiwi, how you doing? I haven't seen you in forever. So nice to see you again after all these years. But yeah, I miss my uncle and my aunt, and they were wonderful folks. And I'm glad you all got to enjoy them up in Maine for many, many years. I only got up to Tsongas once. I was up in Maine for a Grateful Dead show with some friends, and we stopped off in Tsongas, Maine. But so I miss him, and it was a wonderful video. So thank you. And yeah, I remember those times around the table. My mother still sits around that table. She outlived them all, I guess. But
I think she did.
Thank you all so much.
Thank you, Larry. Thanks very much. Okay, then we're going to turn to the folks in the Netherlands. How about Lukey's family? Is there someone from the family that has planned to say something? I see Hans and Rita.
Thank you. Here I am, Rita, the sister of Stan's late wife, Loekie. As a member of our Dutch family, we offer our condolences to Stan and this family. Our family had a very good relationship with Stan, the American brother-in-law, and our uncle, their uncle. And we were pleased with the strong ties between Stan and Loekie. Both active in social work for the community for as long as they could be helpful, as we noticed. A few weeks before his death, Stan wrote a letter to me and to my brother Jos, in which he expressed his gratitude for always being welcome in the Dutch family when they visited Holland, and were in the close contact with the family members of different generations. Through the years, I have met Stan in Holland and in the USA several times with much pleasure. In Brunswick, we were always welcome for staying over and getting company from Loekie and Stan for interesting trips in Maine. The last few years, we kept in touch via Skype with you, and Stan and Loekie were monthly informed of the ups and downs in the families, and so did and that in our surrounding areas. We were always looking forward for these live meetings. After all, we retain good memories of Stan, a remarkable man.
I'd like to say something to Matthew. I should like to offer our condolences to Matthew and Kiwi. We have met Matthew in '66 for the first time and have seen him a few times afterwards in the States. So anyway, it's good to see him again here on the screen. And what about Beatrice? We have met her too, but we don't know whether she is alive. Is still alive?
Yes, she's 99 today.
And
Okay.
that our condolences also to Beatrice.
Thank you so much to both of you, and thank you
Oh,
to all
we
of the
can't hear you.
family in the Netherlands that have shared Lofchie with us for all of these many decades. Is there anyone else from the Netherlands that has something to say?
Thank you. I will introduce myself. I'm the eldest son of Jos. Jos, who is a brother of Rita. My father can't be here because he's already 90. He suffers from Alzheimer's disease, and he has moved to a nursing home only 2 days ago. So it's a little bit too much for him to be present right now. But it's a great comfort to know that this memorial is being recorded, so I can show it to him at some other time, more appropriate time for him. I didn't really prepare something, but I'd like to join in and say something, because I myself have been to Lofchie and Stan in Maine in the late 80s, and I really spent a couple of months at their place. So we did we did a lot of hikes together, and I think I have very good memories of those hikes. And it's nice to mention that they were both lovers of nature walks and hiking. And a particular thing to mention is that I learned how to tie my bootlaces from Stan. And maybe you know, or you don't, but then let me tell you, Stan was always very well prepared, especially on those hikes. Everything was in meticulous order. And it went to all the details, like how to tie your bootlaces. And I do it like he told me till the day of today. So that's a very fond memory. Also, I'd like to address Matthew. Unfortunately, I never met Kevi, but I did meet Matthew in '66 in Holland. And you were the one who taught me to play Frisbee, Matthew. So thanks. And also, it's for me personally, it's nice to know that I knew that you were delivering mail or doing things on your bike in, I believe, in New York. And anyhow, I've been a mailman myself for 14 years in the Netherlands. So when I knew that you were doing similar stuff in the US, that gave me some sense of connection. So maybe it's nice to know that. Well, I think that's, oh yeah, one last memory that is precious to me is that Stanley and Lofchie showed me the earliest sunrise that you can experience in the whole of US, somewhere in the state of Maine. And we did it together. And afterwards, we had some very nice blueberry pancakes in Bar Harbor. So, well, very, very nice to be present at this meeting. And yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Jos, thank you so much for sharing those really beautiful memories. And do send your love, our love and our warm affection to your father. Again, you all were very generous to share Lofchie with us for all these decades. Is there any other? Oh, I see that Open Lukey do.
Yes, I have
Yes.
now on mute.
Yes, thank you.
I can be very short. I remember Stan when he visited Zundert in the Netherlands, and we know him. We remember him as a very pleasant man, and he played part with our son. And so we remember. Sorry, my English is not very good, but so we remember Stan. And that was it. Very short, but. But he was a pleasant man. That is how we remember Stan.
Thank you for sharing. Thank you for sharing. Oh, thank you. So Caroline, it looks like it's time to open this up to anyone else who wants to share. Do you agree?
Yeah, I think it's time.
So here's what I'm going to ask you to do. If you want to say something, to share a memory of Stan, I'm going to ask you to raise your virtual hand. And Kiwi, we promise to get back to you again. I think it would be nice for you to close it up for us. Okay, so so Gary Lawless, I think you're prepared to share something with us today. Gary Lawless, may I say that for those who don't know, Gary and Beth Leonard have an independent bookstore in Brunswick, but it's much more than a bookstore. It's a gathering for community, and it's just an amazing gift to all of us. So Gary, it's all yours.
Thank you. I think I'm unmuted.
You are. I can hear you.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, we've known Stan and Lukey for a long time because of our bookstore, because of Common Ground Fair, because of Let Cuba Live, because of incredible various community efforts, because of Stan and Lukey and Pilar. I actually ended up in Trinidad, Cuba one year in February, which is a great time to go to Trinidad, Cuba. But today I'm serving sort of as the poet function for a memorial event. So what I'm going to do is just read two haiku, two very short poems in honor of Stan. And the first haiku is in honor of Stan's work, especially with Veterans for Peace. And especially Stan and Lukey were both great mentors to us as to how to live our lives opposed to violence, opposed to war, and in positive peace ways. So this first poem, the summer grass is all that's left of an ancient warrior's dream. The summer grass is all that's left of an ancient warrior's dream. It's a poem by Basho, a Japanese poet. And the second haiku is because of the great mentorship of Stan and Lukey, and it's hard to think of them as individual, separate. It's always Stan and Lukey. I can't think of them as separate, and I can't think of them as gone. So this is a little haiku by the Japanese poet Buson. No trail to follow where the teacher has wandered off, the end of autumn. No trail to follow where the teacher has wandered off, the end of autumn. Thank you for doing this.
Thank you for centering us. So Caroline, can you tell us the first three people from his friends and activist community that would speak today?
Yes, Jackie, then Avi, then Jane.
Okay, Jackie Devino, can we get you to unmute? Yeah. Go for it.
Unlike some people, I'm really used to Zoom. So I didn't plan anything to say, but as many of you know, Lukey and I were very close. And as was just mentioned, you can't have one without the other. And Stan was also very special to me too. And I think that I just had to say something because it's hard because these people, I'm sorry, I'm so emotional. These people are so special. And Stan, he could be cantankerous as he could be, but there was this sweet, beautiful man who I would love to go and sit in his lap whenever I had a chance to. So I thank you for holding this for them. Thank you.
I thank you for sharing your sadness with us, Jackie. Thank you. So Avi is next. And then after Avi, Caroline will give us the next three people. Jane would be first. So go ahead, Avi.
Hi, everyone. It's wonderful to see you all. I lived in Maine from 1990 to 97, and I taught at Bates College. And I teach Latin American history, and I came to Bates from Berkeley. And when I was in Berkeley, I was very involved with the many Latin America solidarity organizations there. And then I came to Bates and I thought, oh my God, here I am in the middle of nowhere. There'll be nothing for me to get involved with here. And yet it turned out that, of course, there was. And my research quickly turned to Cuba, and I got involved with Let Cuba Live. I guess I could partly say my research turned to Cuba in part because of the existence of Let Cuba Live. And I soon discovered that Maine actually had the most important Cuba solidarity organization in the entire United States. And when you go to Cuba, everyone says, oh, do you know Let Cuba Live? Wow. But there's a quote from Bertolt Brecht that I don't know in the original. I know it in the voice of a Cuban singer, Silvio Rodriguez, because he introduces one of his songs with it in Spanish. So I'm going to translate it from Spanish into English without knowing the original German. But it always makes me think of Stan and Lukey. And I agree with Gary that it's like Stan and Lukey. But the quote is, there are people who struggle as in, be part of the political struggle for a day and they're good. And there are people who struggle for a year and they're very good. And then there's the people who struggle for their entire life and they're the ones who we can't do without. And every time I heard that, I always thought of Stan and Lukey. They were really mainstays of the organization, Let Cuba Live, and of being able to be a political activist during my years in Maine, to have people to rely on and depend on. And I saw Stan just a couple of years ago after Lukey's death. I don't go to Maine very often now. I live in Massachusetts, but I went up to visit Donna Neff and I believe to give a talk or maybe just to visit, and mostly to visit Stan, I think, because I missed the Lukey's memorial. And we went and visited him and sat in his house and talked. And that's my last memory of spending time with him. But both of them were really important people in my life. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Avi, for sharing. And it does remind me, I will send an email, my email address through the chat to everyone here. Some of us are responsible for cleaning out their home. And so if there's something from their home that we could send to you that will hold the memory of them in your lives, I hope that you would send an email and tell us what that might be. So Caroline, I know that Jane Donellan is next, but who are the three after Jane?
Linda, Eric, and Tom.
Wonderful. So Jane Donellan.
So I got to know Stan and Lukey a bit through the Plants for Peace sale and then various gardening projects. And I also took a little class with Gary on haiku. And so I have written a little poem for Stan.
Thank you.
Wise, passionate, lover of Lukey tulips, rough edges, sweetheart.
I think you got a good grade on that class. Thank you, Jane. That was perfect. I can say that when, yes, Jane is our gardener extraordinaire and has planted tulips throughout the cities of Brunswick and Bath in honor of Lukey. We thank you for that. So I'm assuming Linda is Linda Levesque. Am I right?
Yes, you are.
How wonderful to hear your voice.
Thanks. I'm actually at camp out on the lake, ice fishing, which is why I'm all bundled up. But I wouldn't miss this for the world. And I thank Mary Beth and Barbara West for giving me an invitation here. For those of you that don't know me, I live 2 doors down from Stanley. So he's my neighbor. And I'm his neighbor that he always called, "Hi, neighbor." And I knew Lukey and enjoyed them both tremendously, and sit here and wish I had spent more time with either one or both of them. Very special people. And I do know Matthew. I've spent a couple trips picking him up at the bus station and bringing him into Brunswick. And all of you folks who are gathered here and the ones that will see this as a recording, just so wonderful what you've done in Brunswick and in the world and in the lives of Stanley and Lukey. And Mary Beth, you can call on me if and when, and you will, need help for cleaning out the house, etc. So bless you all.
Thank you, Linda. So Eric Herder, I believe you're next. There you go.
Hey there. Hi.
Hi.
I'm a little shy about public speaking, even on Zoom, and so I scribbled some stuff, and I'm going to read it with your blessing. It's about why we all cared about Stan. Because Stan cared. He cared greatly. He grieved the loss of his soul companion, our gentle, twinkly, loving Lukey. He cared about the wrongs in this country, our politics, our world. Cared so much he'd sometimes scream out loud, shaking kitchen windows, rattling dishes. He cared about his boys, vulnerable and socially distanced America. He cared about his own life, his eyesight failing, his balance uncertain, too much sand through the hourglass. He cared about friends who helped him out, spending time with him, picking up prescriptions and groceries, getting him to doctor's appointments, to the farmer's market where he'd meet the elderly couple with the red van who shared his views, knowing what America is like for people of color, who'd tuck an extra no garlic quiche in his shopping bag, asking gently about his health, giving back too much change. He cared about Cuba, its brown, black, and white people mixed in music and caring for each other, collectively proud at staring down their baleful neighbor to the north who wants their soul, their obedience. He cared about the underdogs fighting the unequal fight, the non-white in our racist country, the poor in our affluent society, the desperate, the addicted, the scorned, the struggling. Their struggles were his as he moved through rooms adorned with banners and buttons from past campaigns for justice and photos of heroes and heroines in this endless battle. Paul Robeson, Pete Seeger, Ella Fitzgerald, Mumia, MLK, Che, Fidel and the Fidelistas, Ho, Lukey Lofchie. Stan cared right to his last moment, he cared, and this drew many of us to this cantankerous, wry, ferocious soul, making us care yet more about the things he raged against and championed. He was and is a cherished soul in our family of like-minded friends, our family of people for peace.
Thank you so much, Eric.
Bless you, Sam. We miss you.
Thank you so much, Eric. There's some real poetry happening today. Kiwi will call on you at the very end to be the last speaker, if that's okay, and then Joanne will read a poem. But right now, I think maybe Tom Whitney is scheduled. Tom.
Okay.
Thank
Thank
you.
you very, very much. And thank you very much for arranging this, and for the people who are on this memorial call. I want to talk about Stan and Let Cuba Live. Let Cuba Live, this was serious business to us. And when I began in 1995, up and for the next 20 years, almost 20 years, not quite, we met 2 times a week. Stan, his participation, he was not a person that would say, we need at the start, let's do this and let's do that. He was there and he would comment on things, and his presence and his commentary, the passion that he showed, excuse me, the passion he showed, and he gave the impression that this was serious business. The fact that he and Lukey were always there for those many years. And of course, he began with Barbara and Steve. I began in 95. He was before that. Stan, his passion, his seriousness, his strong feelings mixed with, he liked you. He liked people, and he showed that just in the tone of his voice. And whenever he would meet him, he hadn't seen him, he would, as if you were his best friend. And he didn't go, but you just had that feeling with Stan. And so, but that kind of came in opposition to each other, because when Stan was expressed things in black and white fashion. So when you were off base, Stan was not shy about telling you that. And Stan kind of talked as if he was speechifying. He would lay it on the line, just where you were wrong and this or that. And normally, I, for one, take alarm at that. I'm paranoid or this, oh, gee, what is it? Not with Stan. This was Stan, because the next moment, it was if nothing had ever happened. He was still your best friend. So Stan could mix that idea of openness and really kind of liking you with strong feelings. And that's what I remember. And just I was always amused. I used to write things. We had a newsletter, and I write things otherwise. And I'm used to editors. And editors, they're kind of gentle people sometimes. They say, well, I think that's not clear. Or what do you mean by that? Or maybe you should do blah, blah. Not Stan. He would call you on the phone, and after a few times, you knew you had to have a pen and pencil right there. Look, what I want to suggest on this, are you ready? Yep, I'm ready. And he would dictate to you a couple of sentences or a paragraph of how it should be. And normally, that's the way it should be. It's true. So yes, Stan and Lukey are both together. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Tom, for a very clear description of the Stan we know and love. Caroline, can you tell us who the next 3 people are?
Karen, then Joanne and Josh, then Vera.
Okay, great.
Okay.
Yeah, Joanne and Josh.
interesting theme that's been emerging today is how could such a sweet guy be so cantankerous? But you know, I first got to know Lukey, and then after she passed, I got to know Stan, and was very privileged to get to know him. He really was a special guy. Well, a day I'll never forget was taking him up to Togus and hearing about the Battle of the Bulge and his personal experiences. And one of the lessons that he took away, I take away, and we all do, is he was originally going to be in the infantry and get sent over. And then he wound up getting sick, possibly with the flu of some sort, and then wound up being placed in the artillery when he went over. And at the Battle of the Bulge, there's probably many battles over there, it was the infantry who took the vast majority of the casualties. And as an artilleryman, he was in the back lines and survived. And it was just the luck of getting the wrong disease at the right time. So I just feel very lucky to do that. It was kind of fun talking about Red Sox with him. You know, he had a deep knowledge, and hearing about his experience as a child, peering through the fence, was all, you know, helped bring things to life. And then going to the farmer's market with Stan was quite an experience. The first time I went, I realized, hey, I'm with the mayor of the farmer's market. You know, everybody knew him and greeted him warmly and gave him discounts. And it was just a lot of fun to be with him. And, you know, he certainly could be cantankerous. I remember one time at a pharmacy checkout line, things didn't go well. And I was shocked at how he unloaded on that unfortunate clerk. You know, he understood it wasn't their problem, it was corporate structure, but, you know, he was speaking from the heart. And then I was over at his house one day, and you know, I'd go shopping for him on Saturdays. There was a box, big box, please open it up. And in it were a couple of birdhouses, you know, and so this is now something that I will have for the rest of my days as a reminder of Stan. I think someone else out in the audience has another. There were three, and he was just giving them away to people. And in my bookcase, there's half a dozen books from Stan, like Jews and baseball, that kind of thing. So I'm just very lucky to have known Stan, and I thank you, Mary Beth and Martin and everyone else for putting this together.
Well, thank you, Josh.
And I'll just add to the generosity of Stan's spirit was there were times that I would send over food to with Josh to deliver, and he was so the way in which he would use superlatives to describe something very ordinary. It was way more than I deserved, but he would say something like, that yogurt was spectacular, and he really meant it. Or, you know, that soup was stupendous. But Stan was really quite self-sufficient when it came to taking care of himself and feeding himself. And it wasn't very long ago that he asked Josh to pick him up some peas in the pod because there was a new recipe that he was trying. And I think in today's parlance, you might describe him as a bit of a foodie. I remember seeing him and Lukey at the Indian restaurant in town and just, you know, just relishing, you know, every bite of their meal. And I just want to mention also that his connection to Judaism, I think, was very strong, even though he wasn't a practicing Jew. His Orthodox upbringing was very much imprinted. A couple of years ago, we took him to Rosh Hashanah services at Bowdoin with us. And the rabbi, who was relatively new at that point, and students led the service. And he just raved about, you know, all of them, the students, the rabbi's sermon. And I think he was quite pleased to be amongst us that day, as we were as well. So thank you.
Well, and I have to say, Joanne and Josh were key to helping Stan stay at home in the last years of his life. So
Privileged to do it.
we're grateful that you were. All right. Okay, great. And so, Karen,
Yes.
you're on, girl.
Yes. Well, I always had a feeling that Stan was my relative. I don't know, it's because we were both Jewish, but there was something that made me feel related to him. And he was, Stan was a curmudgeon, but he never was a curmudgeon towards me. And so I felt really blessed. And he always responded with such love and affection. I felt a very special connection with him. And yes, he was really, really a special fellow. And I felt more like a relative than a friend. He was a beautiful man. Thanks.
Well said, Karen Weinberg. Thank you very much. Vera King. It's Vera, Johnny, and then Doug. Go ahead, Vera.
Hi. It's wonderful that you did this for Stan, and it's so wonderful to be here and to see everyone. It's great. And I knew Stan and Lukey for a long time, and I love them both. And my family always did games and word games, and I love languages. And I wrote a haiku for Stan, but I did not take Gary's class. But so I lived in Japan, and so I wrote the haiku in English and to my best Japanese that I could. It's in Japanese too. So I'm going to read it in English and then Japanese. And I learned at another workshop, haiku workshop I went to, that you're supposed to read the haiku once and then pause and then read it again. So I'll do it in English first and then Japanese. So working for justice, a strong gentleman was Stan, peace at any price. Working for justice, a strong gentleman was Stan, peace at any price. Now in Japanese. Seigi-kan, Stan wa tsuyoi, heiwa boke. Seigi-kan, Stan wa tsuyoi, heiwa boke. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Vera. Thank you so much. The poetry has a big influence in this community. It's pretty beautiful to hear. So Johnny Schooley, another person that supported Stan in his end years, and for many more than that. So where are you, Johnny?
I'm right here.
Go for it.
I just want to say how touched I am by everyone who spoke today so far, and Martin, I'm going to nominate you for an Emmy or an Oscar for your video. It's absolutely, it was so touching, and I was brought to tears, literally. They were wonderful people, and I think one of the words that comes to mind for me with Stan and with Lukey is courage. And the courage that they had in their latter years and dealing with, aging, which a lot of us are doing right now, was just admirable. And, to to the very end, you know, they just kept going, and you know, just like in the Union song, they just kept going, and that kept them strong to the end. And it was just an honor to know him, and thank you.
Thank you for sharing, Johnny. Thank you, and for all the medical support you offered him over much time. So Doug Rawlings, it's Doug and then Beth and then Nancy. So Doug, you're next.
Thanks, Mary Beth. For those of you who don't know, that Veterans for Peace was founded here in the state of Maine in 1985. And our major principle was to abolish war, to do it nonviolently. And over the years, we've attracted many veterans like Stan. Stan Curmudgeon, please, right? You should come to one of our conventions sometime and watch all of us together. I think we joined Veterans for Peace because we have this weird combination of rage and empathy. And the mix of those two together can be quite volatile. We never do enough for each other or for the organization. And I'd like to also say we're an organization of people who hate organizations, but there we are. And so we're constantly at loggerheads, but it was all out of love. And I just like to finish with, Avi reminded me of Bertolt Brecht, and I used to have this poster in my office where Brecht said, art is not a mirror held up to reality, but a hammer with which to shape it. And I think Stan lived a life like that. He was not willing to just reflect reality. He wanted to shape it, as we all do. So thank you for doing this, Mary Beth. Appreciate it a lot. Take care.
Thank you, Doug. Another poet in our midst. Beth Marco. Can you unmute? Where are you?
Hi. First up, thank you, Mary Beth and Martin and anyone else who was part of putting this all together. It's so wonderful to be with all of you and to see all of you, some of you that I haven't seen in a long time, and many of you I've never met. I just wanted to say what a privilege and an honor it's been to be a part of Stan and Lukey's life. And I think one of the things that always gave me the most pleasure was baking a surprise to give to them. And one of their favorite things, and I think it was maybe the second to the last thing that I had Gia take over to Stan, was Jan Hagel cookies, which I know were Lukey's favorite too. And they're fun to make and even more fun to eat, but such a pleasure to give, and such a pleasure to give them something in return for everything that they've given to us.
Well, Beth, thank you so much. And thanks also to Gia, who was really a key part of the community support that helped him stay home for these years. Gia's support was really instrumental for him. He spoke frequently about how much he loved those visits. So it's Nancy, Courtney, and then Pilar. Nancy Galland.
Okay, hi. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay.
Perfectly.
I wanted to be last in case somebody else wanted to speak. I'll try to make it really brief. I just wanted to, one thing is all of you. I mean, I would brag to people that didn't even know Stan how incredible it was that his community kept him in his home for so many years. It is a rare thing. Without any formal organization, it was just out of not just love, yes, but respect and admiration and recognition of a person who was devoted to making this a better world. And it really was a very rare phenomenon. And I just felt like what a lucky man, and it just reflects how you all felt that you were lucky as well. Now, I'm saying this in this manner because I know Stan from a very, very different place than everybody else so far here. I met him in 1976 through my husband, Richard Stander, when Richard and I started farming organically in Massachusetts. And everywhere that Richard seemed to move to, Stan and Lukey would move there too, or at least in that same reachable area. And so they came by one day when we were farming in order to meet me. And we've been very tight ever since. And they've been very instrumental in both of our lives, Richard and mine, and also in my life after Richard died, which was 9 years ago. They got us to Maine. We had to leave the farm we were on because of chemical sprays from neighboring farmers who were very hostile toward us. Those are the early days of organic farming. And they sent us this letter from this ad from MOFGA, Maine Organic Farmers newsletter, about a farm in Belfast that they were looking for farmers to take over because the owner had an accident and died. Without that, we never would have farmed again because we had no money. All we had was a tractor and a truck, period. So they saved our lives with that little missile. And also, since Richard died, they were just really important for me to go to for advice and perspective. And Richard and Stan really were like brothers. I could have easily believed that they were. They had so many characteristics that were alike. Their humor, their talent at raconteuring, their passion for peace and justice, fierce as fire, and their also that spontaneous outbursting of rage that could knock you over. Richard did that too. They were so much alike. But anyway, so I just want to thank you all for being there for him in the way that you have been. It's one of the more beautiful things I've ever witnessed. And I think Stan, actually, I'm going to say, I think he was ready to go. I'm sorry he had to go through an accident that he had. It was terrible. But I think that he certainly, Mary Beth and I were both saying how if you asked him, how are you, Stan? He would say, don't ask me. So I think he was ready. So
thanks so much for sharing, Nancy. And let's raise a glass for lifelong friends.
Yes.
Beautiful. So here's the list as I see it: Courtney, Pilar, Joanna, Marion, Mike, Bruce, and then Kiwi. So if there's anyone else, let Caroline know by raising your hand. So Courtney,
Hi.
you're next.
Donna's here with me, and it was my pleasure to drive Stan to his eye doctor in Portland for the last few years. And it was funny that on the way in, we would discuss political issues and current events, and Stan somehow with his limited vision would have been all the way through the Boston Globe and quoting it readily to me. I don't know how he managed it. But then after the long wait in the office and the treatment, on the way home, he was like a baby in the car. Within 2 minutes, he was asleep and slept the whole way. But the thing that I always get a kick out of is Stan would sometimes ask me, a retired physician, to go with him to a doctor's office visit. And as Eric's eloquent poem said, Stan had seen the sands go through the hourglass for quite a while, and he looked that way. But the staff, the medical staff, was always courteous and respectful of Stan. I always get the biggest kick out of it because by the time we got him undressed and ready to be examined, they'd start to take a history. And all of a sudden, they would have to check his chart again and ask him how old he was, because all of a sudden he sounded 20 years younger because his mind was so sharp. And one day I had to take him to the emergency room for abdominal pain. And we had him all ready to be examined. The nurse came in and talked to him and started to examine him and said, "Now, Mr. Lukey, if I hurt you, you be sure to let me know." And he said, "You'll be the first to know." Everybody just laughs. Even under those circumstances, he still had his sense of humor.
And I used to go over every Tuesday and sort through pictures. He wanted to be sure that all of their collections of pictures went to the right people. And so every Tuesday I'd take him lunch and we would go through the boxes of pictures and we put them, clear off all the newspapers from the kitchen table or dining room table and put the pictures in piles. But I wasn't smart enough to then put them in an envelope, because I'd come back the next week and he'd have them all commingled again and they were all everywhere. And so we'd sort through them again. By round 3, I brought some manila envelopes and we first addressed the envelopes, and some went to Holland and some went wherever they were going to go. And so we addressed the envelopes and finally we got it put together so that they all went. And my wonderful memory of them was then taking them, getting them stamped and going to the post office and telling him that the pictures are there in the right places. And he was so happy. And he also had a wonderful book on the Cuban Revolution. And he and I talked about that a lot because I've been to Cuba 33 times, I guess. And so we would go through the book and we'd talk about the revolution. And that was just a very special photo book that we shared. And I will always remember him. He was a really very special friend. And when we moved up here, I came up at first long years ago for a Let Cuba Live event. And Lukey grabbed me by the cheeks and she said, "You have to come up. You have to move up." We lived in Boston. And every week she would send us little newspaper clippings from the paper of local houses for sale. And eventually we took her up on it. And here we are very happily on High Street. Thank you for putting this together and for bringing all of us together. Thank you.
Courtney and Donna, thank you both for being here and sharing. That was lovely. Pilar, you're next.
I'm going to say that I'm going to speak on the personal, then about the international, and then the local, and then end with a quick personal. But I've written it down so I won't take up so much time thinking aloud.
Thank you.
First of all, the reason why I live in Brunswick was because of Stan and Lukey. Similar, kind of like what happens with Don, except I came for an interview to teach at Bowdoin College. And in my free time during the weekend of interviews, I found this bookstore called Gulf of Maine Books. I went in and my jaw dropped because it had the kind of books that most bookstores don't have. And so I asked the bearded man, may I ask you an open question? How many Latinos and Spanish-speaking people do you have in Brunswick? And he says, well, not many. And he didn't say anybody. I said, oh, because I'm trying to figure if I would get along moving here and teaching here and making this. And he said, hold it a minute. He got on the phone and then he said, do you have an appointment for lunch? And I said, no, I'm free until this evening. And he called and Stan and Lukey arranged a luncheon with all the leftist people in Brunswick who brought a dish, and they made me feel welcome as a Cuban American. So that's one personal story. The next one is, you've all heard about Let Cuba Live. I want to mention that when it came time for Brunswick to find a sister city in Cuba, and this Stan was very much involved and interested in this, he and Lukey went to Cuba on their second trip to check out and see which city they thought would be the most, have things in common with Brunswick. And they were right on with Trinidad, Cuba, right on beyond anybody's belief. And I'm not going to tell you all the things that we have in common, but it makes me gasp because there's no other city in Maine that has as many things in common with Trinidad than Brunswick. Okay. And the other thing is, not only did they contribute generously, I know, to Let Cuba Live, but also to the sister city. I made many trips representing the sister city and taking professionals to meet with their counterparts, non-politically. Stan was always helping financially because I never charged for my translating and escorting everyone. And so Stan enabled that for me as a Cuban American, which means a lot more than you can imagine. I'll tell you why at the end. Finally, not only was Sister City Trinidad a benefit in Cuba from Stan and Lukey's help, but on the early trip in 2004, I took 14 professionals to meet with their counterparts, and some of them were musicians, and 2 of them were folk musicians, American blues musicians, which they were invited to play because the blues has a connection with African descendancy. And so I connected them. Well, lo and behold, that was Jim Loney and Paul D'Alessio. And when they came back, they had stayed for 2 weeks. They had learned Cuban music and they had bought Cuban instruments, and they formed a band called Primo Cubano, which is Maine's only Cuban music band. And although Jim isn't in the band, Paul gathered a group and is still earning a living performing regularly all around, not just Maine, all over the place. So Primo Cubano benefited from Stan. And then finally, I'm going to say this is my last thing, and it's my personal. With Stan, we had an agreement that whenever I took a trip, I would come back and report to him on the positives and the difficulties in Trinidad, because I didn't even bother to stay in Havana. I went straight. And so I would give a report. And Stan was one of the few people that I, as a Cuban American, could be a Cuban American without being harangued and made uncomfortable, because I support the Cuban Revolution and what it stands for. And so I would go there when I was like up to here with Florida and Marco Rubio and whatever. And Stan would listen, which is a rare thing, and then join in with me so that I did not feel alone. And I have to tell you, I miss Stan. I miss Lukey. Lukey was one of my first private Spanish students, so she could speak Spanish when she went to Cuba. Vera was in that class. But I miss being able to speak openly and be myself. And that is why I really, really loved Stan and will miss him.
Thank you so much for sharing all of yourself with us right now, Pilar. Thank you so much.
Okay.
So Mary and Mike, why don't we hear from you from out there in Vermont?
Yeah. Hi there. Thanks everyone for putting this together today. So Mike and I and our family know Stan and Lukey probably since '84. And I think he was not only Jewish, but I think he was Irish too, because every St. Patrick's Day, I would hear something from Stan. Either he would deliver a plant to me or books, but he never let St. Patrick's Day go without honoring Ireland. But I also want to share something with you, a personal story. I was up at Lukey's house one day. We were going to go out for a sandwich at the Little Dog Cafe. And I sat down at the table with them, as all of you probably have. And something I said really triggered Stan, and he went into a rage, and he was angry, really angry. And Lukey got upset and left the table and went into the little bathroom in the kitchen. And then Stan got up and went into the kitchen and sat at the table. And I sat in the dining room thinking, I want to say goodbye to Lukey. So I went into the kitchen and I said to Stan, my words created such anger in you today. I'm very, very sorry. I'm sorry. And I went back into the dining room. And Lukey came out to the dining room, and we stood there, kind of looking at each other. And then Stan appeared, and he put his arms, he grabbed the both of us, and he put his arms around the both of us, the three of us. And he said, "I'm sorry, I'm sorry." And he cried. And he kept saying, "I'm sorry." And he then finally said, "Let's go down the little dog cafe and have a sandwich." And that's my story. And I saw something in Stan that day, that he had such feeling and compassion and love for Lukey, love for her.
Thank you, Mary. That was a beautiful share. Mike, do you have anything?
I do. A couple of words about Stan. Oh, Stan. And, publicly, I think of him as a person that would rage against any social injustice. He would rage, and he would rage against anybody that wasn't quite correct either. At one time he said, "Donnelly, the problem with you, you just haven't been hit in the side of the head with a brick." and he's right. I had not been hit in the side. But on other times, he would give me more gift bottles of Irish whiskey than anybody I've ever met. He was so kind in a personal level, and kind and generous.
Yeah.
I have to say that I really love the guy.
Yeah.
Well,
That's
thanks for sharing, both of you. We really love you too, and we miss you since you've moved to Vermont. So Bruce Gagnon.
All right, here we go. I'm wearing this hat in memory of Stan, who almost always had a hat on. So Stan was probably in my life one of the 2 or 3 smartest people I ever met. He knew more about anything than anyone could ever imagine. And I used to just love to sit at his feet, so to speak, and just soak up his many, many years of wisdom. And he was a great storyteller. And I've noticed that Matthew and Kiwi also have that same gift of storytelling. So it was always a great pleasure, and especially his baseball stories, his knothole Boston Braves, knothole gang stories, as a kid, pretty amazing. When Mary Beth and I were thinking of moving to Maine in 2003, like we're hearing from others, it was Stan and Lukey that, particularly Lukey, that arranged for us to move into their neighborhood just a few doors from their house. As it turned out, one of the condos was for sale, but there were already 3 bidders ahead of us, and they went to the owner and spoke to the owner and asked the owner to back out of the other bids and take us instead for less money. So that's how we became neighbors of Lukey and Stan, and certainly we benefited it in 100 million ways with love and kindness. I have 2 coats, the warmest boots I own, warmest gloves I own, all given to me by Stan. Stan had an amazing open heart, something that in my life I'm trying to learn to have as well, to that level. Thank you.
Thanks for sharing, Bruce. So Kiwi, this has been a very long 2 hours, and I'm wondering at this point how you're doing and whether you want a couple of minutes to share a story of your own about your dad.
All right. Bruce is really a delight. But I think both he and Mary Beth are smart enough to know that way back in the in when Stan and Luke were courting. This is in the about 1961 or 1963. They were married December 2nd, 1964, and Dad was in desperate search of how to become a gentleman. He didn't have that. He had everything that Bruce said about him is true, but he was in search of how to become a gentleman. Okay, it is well known throughout the Lofchie Trachtenberg uh, family that Maria Louise Weissmuller had a tremendous impact on teaching Stan how to calm down. And so you and Bruce have reaped that benefit. Last but not, let me say this. Uh, Dad left me very reassured that I was in the best possible care here at Bannister Center. Uh, and that, oh, by the way, I, I got your parcel of photos.
Great.
Okay, I opened them briefly, but a therapist here is whenever I'm ready is willing to buy me an album for all of the photos, and
Lovely.
they include photos of Matthew and me also. So I could that's really all the time that my contribution warrants. I
Thank you.
could say more. That's enough.
We'll talk another time. Please call me again and we can
Yeah.
review this whole event. Thank you so much, Kiwi.
Yeah.
So we have two things left to engage. One is to hear a poem that Joanne Rosenthal is bringing to us from Marge Piercy. And then Martin's going to show finally again the video of just a short clip of the video of Stan singing with his sons. So Joanne, are you ready?
I am.
Thank you.
Thank you. I chose this Marge Piercy poem to close out this really wonderful celebration of Stan's life. As was earlier said, that the biblical Kaddish is recited. It's not about death, but it's about what binds us together in memory. And this is Marge Piercy's Kaddish. Let us look around, search above us, below, behind. We stand in a great web of being joined together. Let us praise, let us love the life we are lent, passing through us in the body of Israel and our own bodies. Let's say Amen. Time flows through us like water. The past and the dead speak through us. We breathe out our children's children. Blessing. Blessed is the earth from which we grow. Blessed the life we are lent. Blessed the ones who teach us. Blessed the ones we teach. Blessed is the word that cannot say the glory that shines through us and remains to shine, flowing past distant suns on the way to forever. Let's say Amen. Blessed is light, blessed is darkness, but blessed above all else is peace, which bears the fruits of knowledge on strong branches. Let's say Amen. Peace that bears joy into this world, peace that enables love, peace over Israel everywhere. Blessed and holy is peace. Let's say Amen.
Thank you so much, Joanne. I think we have to say thank you to Beth and Gary for bringing us an independent bookstore in our lovely community. Thanks to all of us for the shared love of Stan Lofchie. And thank you for sharing this time and space together to remember a remarkable human being. Martin, can you sing us out? Everyone is welcome to join the Lofchies as they sing Solidarity Forever.
Solidarity forever. Solidarity forever. Solidarity forever. For the union makes us strong.
When the union's inspiration through the workers' blood shall run, there can be no power greater anywhere beneath the sun. Yet what force on earth is weaker than the feeble strength of one? But the union makes us strong.
Solidarity forever, for the union makes us strong.
In our hands is placed a power greater than their hoarded gold, greater than the might of atoms, magnified 1,000-fold. We can bring to birth a new world from the ashes of the old, for the union makes us strong.
Solidarity forever, for the union makes us strong.
Solidarity forever, for the union makes us strong.
Stan Lofchie, presente.
Stan Lofchie, presente. Stan Lofchie, presente.
Wonderful job.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Unmute your microphones and say goodbye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you for doing
Goodbye. Goodbye. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you.
Stay safe, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Great. Wonderful.
Martin.
Thank you. Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
It was a thing of beauty and a joy forever.
Yes, amen.